How's it going, everybody? Welcome to this week's episode of Perfect Reload Weekly, where we take a look back at the week in video game news. My name is Steve, and I am joined, as always, by the one and only, the incomparable Christian Slater. Christian, how you doing this week?
Oh man, watching you stuff yourself into a suit this week was a true highlight. Fat guy in a little coat.
That coat fit perfectly, and I looked stylish in a suit. It's like the second time in my life that I had to wear a suit, but I pulled that off. But yeah, this week, man, like I said on the show last week that this past week was going to be a blur for me, and 100% it absolutely was. I was running all over the place, going in and out of town all week. But some good things happened, and that's nice. But in terms of how it affects the show, that didn't leave me with a lot of time to play games, although I did get a chance to play one in particular, but nothing new. So while I did play hours wise, I played games. I played some more of Phantom Liberty, played some more of the MK1 story mode, not too much, but a little bit here and there. And I'm grinding, on NBA 2K24, but I guess the big thing was I finished Starfield. I finished the story. It got to the point where I kind of realized on Friday that I wasn't really going to have anything to talk about on this show when it comes to games, because there wasn't really any new releases outside of Assassin's Creed, and buying Assassin's Creed was just out of the question because I just didn't have time to play a game and I wanted to justify the purchase. I'm going to try and play at least some of it before the end of the year. Because I am very much interested in it. I liked the original Assassin's Creed games before they kind of got into these bizarro 90+ hour RPGs. What did that start with? Odyssey or Origins? I can't remember which came first, but honestly, my favorite out of all of them was I liked one. I liked the original Assassin's Creed the most. That was the one that I kind of connected with the most. I didn't particularly care for the Ezio ones all that much. I did like 3, actually, honestly. 3 actually wasn't too bad. And 4, 4, the Black Flag, wasn't all that bad, but I gave up after, whichever one came first, Odyssey or Origins. I want to say it was Origin. But that was kind of it. Once I realized that, like, that's what these games are going to be, I burned out pretty quickly on it. I was like 20 hours into that game, and I was like, man, is this really going to be the cycle for the rest of this game? If so, I think I'm probably good. And I remember at the time I talked to a coworker who was way farther into the game than I was. And I asked him about it, and I was like, is this pretty much what I'm going to be doing for the rest of this game? And he was like, yeah. He's like, I love it, though. And he's like, but you might. And I knew right away. I was like, I do not want to be doing this for the rest of the game. So I kind of called it quits there. So I didn't check out any of the ones that came after that. But I will try and get to it before the end of the year. But Starfield, on Friday night, I was like, what do I have left to do in Starfield? Because I had kind of stopped playing Starfield a little bit. I'd run into 2 really major bugs. I was in the middle of probably one of the better known, I guess, side quests in the game, and there was a bug that was preventing me from finishing it. And also I had a bug where the next of the main quest missions had dropped out of my quest log, or my mission log, whatever you want to call it. It was there, and literally I had saved and then it was gone. And those were 2 like really well-known bugs. So I was able to figure out how to fix both of those. Ultimately, I could not fix the side quest one. I could finish it, but there was an issue with it that I'll get into in a moment. But I was able to at least get through it. Sorry, you can hear my dog going nuts in the other room with squeaking a toy. So I kind of committed to, I need to talk about something on the show. What do I exactly need to do to kind of wrap up what I want to do in this game? Because I was getting like pretty close to the end. I knew that I only had 3 or 4 missions left in the main quest, and just a handful of side quests that I wanted to do. So I ended up going online and kind of just looked up a bunch of articles that were like, what are the best side quests? And there was only a few of them that I hadn't finished. So I sought those out to get those done, and then I was like, all right, let's wrap up the main story. So what we are going to do is I'm going to have the timestamp here for the beginning. We're going to get into Starfield spoilers because anytime I finish a game, if you haven't been following the show, throughout the year, since I started back up again, when I finish a game, I like to go into like a full-on spoiler discussion to really kind of dig into my thoughts without having to worry about spoiling things. So there's going to be a timestamp here. So if you don't want Starfield spoilers, you can skip ahead to the next section. But yeah, let's get into it. So it's funny with Starfield, right? Because when we were streaming the game the night it came out, I didn't want to say this on stream in case I was wrong, and also in case I was right. And I didn't want somebody to potentially comment on the video and I would see that being like, oh yeah, no, you're totally right. This is what happens with this game. Within the first 30 minutes of the game, I figured out what the story was. And when it really picks up, I talk about it. If you go back to my initial video on Starfield, I talk about a very specific mission. I think it's all the money in the world. It's whatever mission is before that. It's kind of when they lay out you are going to go collect these artifacts and all this stuff. And this is what the loop of the game is going to be. Now, at the time, I didn't really know what was going to happen when we got the artifacts. But they kind of explained hey, this is the crux of the game here. But I figured out, like I said, probably within the first 30 minutes that this game was about time travel. And I'll tell you exactly how I figured it out. It's not because I, read into some weird thing that a character said or anything like that. It was the pause menu. When you pause the game while somebody is speaking and you unpause the game, there's the sound effect of it speeding back up again. Like somebody was taking their finger on a record and pushing it forward to make it play at a faster speed or a slower speed. And I was like, that's weird. That makes it seem like time is catching up. And that just kind of stuck in my head. And every time I would pause the game while somebody was speaking and I would hear that effect, and it would happen with non-dialogue too, just basically anytime there was sound happening, gunfire, whatever, I was like, this game's about time travel, isn't it? It's going to be about time travel. And then you get to the point where you meet the Starborn, which is, kind of the big thing where there's the hunter and the emissary are kind of along for the ride with you in a way. They actually don't pop up that much. I was actually really surprised because when you get the armillary on your ship, if you choose to put it on your ship, they're like, hey, people might pop up to try and take it from you and you're going to have to fight them. That happened twice, I want to say, for the rest of the game. I thought that was kind of odd. But when they started explaining this is a multiverse thing. And I was like, oh, fucking course it is, because everything has to be a multiverse thing. And I get that they probably committed to that multiverse concept probably early on with the game, and they probably didn't realize that hey, this game, by the time this game actually finally comes out, the whole idea of a multiverse is going to be kind of beating a dead horse at this point, right? But I still think that it was an interesting concept to go into. I think that there are some really cool things that they do with why Earth is barren. You can go to Earth in the game. You can go to Earth whenever you want in the game, but there's a story quest that brings you to Earth, and you actually go to the last vestiges of NASA. And I actually thought that was really cool that NASA was involved in this game. I initially thought that it was an odd thing when you start the game, there's a copyright for NASA in it. And I was like, that can't just be because they use the term NASA punk to describe their visual style, right? There's gotta be something else. And then I was like, oh, in the beginning of the game, one of the first planets you go to is Mars. And I was like, oh, maybe the rover is in here or something like that. And that's why NASA has their copyright, because they put the rover in here. And it actually ended up being much more cooler than that. It was this whole, you kind of go through this museum of, kind of this, fictional history of NASA as, they expanded out into the universe, and they found this artifact and it drained Earth of its resources because the grav drives that power your ship to do this, cross star system travel or secret, killing things, right? And I was like, that's a really cool concept. I think that the beginning of the story is very much fetch quest, fetch quest, fetch quest. Like it is nonstop fetch quest. And that gets old, but at the same time, they do a really good job of kind of halfway through-ish that story mode. It stops being a fetch quest. Like you still have to go get the artifacts. But it stops being just go to the planet, kill some guys, grab the artifact, go back to the lodge. Like they start putting in some stuff, like when you go to the ship and it's the guy that collects things. He's like the collector in the universe, and he has an artifact there. Or the late game one, the Untangled mission, where you're bouncing back and forth between different dimensions because the artifact is affecting this research facility. And that mission was cool. I think that they were really hoping that was going to be the star of the show, so to speak, that mission, because it is kind of an interesting idea of you were bouncing back and forth between dimensions. I think it's diluted a lot because of the way the game is structured from a design standpoint. I think it would have been done way more justice if things transformed in real time, kind of like the game Control, instead of it always fading to black and then it coming back up as it's like loading into this other version of this other dimension. It's like alternate timeline. So it didn't quite hit its mark on it. But overall, I think the story is very good. I'm a little bit bummed out about the end of the game when it's like, oh, the reason why we have to do this is because it's the reason why we have to do this. Like, there's really no clear-cut explanation why the emissary and the hunter and essentially you are stuck in this time loop for all of eternity to collect these artifacts and form the Armillary and step into Unity. There's no real clear reason why. It's just like, oh, that's what we have to do because the creators, that's the way they made everything. And it's just like the fact that they use the term the creators, like they couldn't have come up with something else. I don't know. It was just kind of like a lame duck ending in a way, in a way. And I'll expand upon that. Because the new game plus mechanic, I think, is one of the most inventive game mechanics ever, maybe. To be honest, I really think that that's like the one really defining thing from this game is New Game Plus. The idea that you can, at the end of the game, decide, nope, I'm good. I don't want to actually complete the story. I'm just going to back out and keep my save file the way it is, keep all my relationships intact, go back into that world and just keep living the life I was living. The main story is over, but I could do any side quests I didn't do. I could do these activities. I could become a space trucker. I could just run bounty missions off the mission board. Like I could just do whatever I want to do and everything stays the same. Or you can engage with the New Game Plus. You start over, but you're a Starborn now yourself. So when the game begins again, you have this dialogue that, you know, the game starts pretty much the same way. And then you have this dialogue that's like, wait, before you start talking, I am this Starborn person. We have done this all before. We are stuck in a time loop. And you can choose to do this New Game Plus with all of the story missions and repeat them, or you could just do the main crux of the game and just collect those artifacts and rinse, repeat, and keep getting more powerful, more powerful, more powerful. And every time you restart the game, there's the opportunity that it's going to be like a broken version of the game. Like you will start it and all the members of Constellation are children, or you will start it and they're all dead because the hunter killed them, or you start it and everybody is you. And like it, you know, that's some really, really cool shit. And I give them a lot of credit for pulling that off. It is a really, really cool mechanic. You know, in my Game of the Year stuff last year, I did best feature or, you know, kind of thing. And, you know, I was planning on doing it again this year, and it's really down to this Starfield New Game Plus and Viewfinder's camera, because Viewfinder's camera is like as mind-bending of a puzzle mechanic or a puzzle-solving mechanic as the portal gun was. And the portal gun has become this really iconic thing. Now, Viewfinder, unfortunately, I don't think is ever going to come to the height of popularity of Portal, but in terms of cleverness, in inventiveness, in ingenuity, it's right up there with it. And I think Starfield's New Game Plus should be put on a very high pedestal for coming up with a really interesting twist on an old mechanic. New Game Plus is something that a lot of games have, and it's usually fairly uniform across the video game development landscape, where it's like you keep all your powers perhaps, and some costumes or whatever, and then you start fresh and you're kind of like level 100 when the game begins, and you go through and sometimes there's some New Game Plus only stuff that you can interact with. But I think the way Starfield handles it is really, really interesting. So to finish the thought from the beginning of the show, where I talked about that side quest that I got stuck on, it was the Project Starseed one, where you go to this remote planet and everybody there is a clone of a famous historical figure. You deal with FDR, Genghis Khan is there, Amelia Earhart is there, Wyatt Earp, who actually secretly H.H. Holmes. That was really cool. I thought that was a really neat mission, but it's severely, severely bugged, where when you finish the mission and you go back to complete it and make that last conversation to end the mission, everybody turns hostile on you and kills you, and so you can't interact with them. I finally got it to the point where I could trigger the conversation to end the mission, and then when that's done, you can recruit Amelia Earhart to be a member of your crew, which is something that I wanted to do. But as soon as I finished that conversation, they all turned hostile on me. I could not get it to work any other way. I at least finished the quest. I got the XP for it and all that, but I couldn't recruit Amelia Earhart to be on my crew. So that was disappointing, but I still think it was one of the cooler side quests in the game. I think that one's really interesting. Juno's Gambit's really interesting, where it deals with like AI, like is AI human and all that stuff. And then I talked about it in the very first one, the Constant mission, which is very like a very Star Trek one, where it's like these space travelers that were dormant in space, and they wake up and realize that the planet that they were supposed to inhabit has now been taken over by like a resort. It's like Sandals Jamaica has taken over your planet, and you have to figure out where you're going to live now. So there's some really interesting side missions there. I think the faction stuff, I think all the factions are really weak except for the UC Vanguard one. The UC Vanguard one in an alternate timeline probably would have been the main story of this game. Oh, excuse me. Heartburn this weekend. UC Vanguard one is super fleshed out. All the other ones are really weak. The Ryujin Industry one in particular is super weak because the large majority of it takes place all on the same planet. It is a series of very short missions where you are essentially doing the same thing over and over again. And when you factor in fast travel, you're basically just using menus to warp to a planet, going to a location, stealing something and warping back and going to hand in your homework, basically. The Crimson Fleet one is really disappointing. The Crimson Fleet is really poorly written. One of the characters in particular uses the same line of dialogue 9 times in the same conversation. And that was driving me up the wall, like really to the point where I was like, I don't want to play this mission. These characters are horrible. But, it gave you a couple of interesting things to do, I guess. I also really don't like the fact that through that quest line, you run the Red Mile, and it does not give you credit for running the Red Mile because there's a separate activity you can complete, or maybe it's an actual side quest you can complete to run the Red Mile. And I would think that doing it once would just be like, hey, you did it. Here's the XP for doing it. What's the next one? The Freestar Ranger one is actually like fairly short, deals with like kind of like a conspiracy cover up type thing. And, it's just not fleshed out enough. You needed to spend more time with Ron Hope to really make that hit home, because he's supposed to be this like super big, important figure in the world. And especially in the colony, he created Hopetown. But it's so quick and it's over with, in a very easy manner. Basically, like you have 2 conversations with him and the last one ends with like you having to kill him. And they just could have done more with it. I think that's all the faction stuff, unless I'm forgetting something. The Crimson Fleet, the Vanguard, Ryujin, and Freestar. Yeah, I think there's 4 of them. Let's see what else before I get into kind of like my overall thoughts. I guess that's probably I think there are so many things that you just don't have to interact with, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but like I never really did any shipbuilding. I ended up getting a really, really good ship, and I can't remember where I got it from. I can't remember if I just bought it from a vendor or if it was one of the ones that's gifted to you. But it was so overpowered that there was just like no incentive, and the shipbuilder tool set is so limited right now. It's just not fun to work with. And there are some people doing amazing stuff with it. Like if you go on the Starfield subreddit, there's some really crazy stuff that people have done with it, but there's no way to like preview the ship to make sure the pieces are fitting together, to really get an idea of what the pieces even look like internally. With a controller, it's not great. Like sure, I could have shifted over to the PC version to mess around with it, but so I just didn't really do that. And then the space station, or not space station, the settlement stuff, outpost, that's the name of it, outpost. It's very expensive to do. I preferred to level up my points, put my points into other mechanics of the game, and in a different world I would have spent a lot of time with it, but I just wanted to play the game. I personally don't have interest in just going around blindly to planets. I did do some of it at some point. I spent a good few hours just going to random planets to see what was on there. But that's just not the way that I chose to play the game, which is cool because I didn't have to. And you also don't have to play the game the way that I did either. You can play it however you want to. And I think that that's probably like overall the biggest net positive of Starfield, right? Is like it's the same game that everybody buys, but it doesn't have to be the same experience. And some of those experiences can be like wildly different. There are people that have put hundreds of hours into this and still haven't touched like the third story quest. It's not a requirement to do so. And I think that's a really interesting thing. All right. So why don't I give my kind of overall thoughts on the game? So I don't rate games. I don't do like, I think it's a 9 out of 10 or anything like that. I have an internal thing. I keep an Excel spreadsheet, which I call it my media tracker. And I do this every year. And basically I write down every album I listen to, every movie I watch, and every video game that I play. And I assign it some stars, and those stars aren't like, oh, I think this is a 5-star game or something like that. It's simply for me to quickly give it a glance. So when I'm doing like game of the year stuff, that can be like, oh, well, everything that I gave 3 stars to has to make the list. Everything that I gave 2 stars to, it's not because I think the game is like so much better than a 1-star game or anything like that. It's just like, it's just an organizational thing. And, with Starfield, I think that it's a game. I kind of lost my train of thought. I apologize. It's a very good game. Oh, this is what I was getting to. I don't rate games. Yeah, so I'm not going to give Starfield like a score or anything like that. So I'll say I think it's a very good game. I think it has some very ambitious ideas. I think some of those ideas land and some of those don't. The reason why some of those ideas don't land is because the game is too big. Starfield essentially collapses under its own weight, is a really good way to think about that. And I mean that in more ways than one. It collapses under its own weight because, for me at least, the longer I played it, the more game-breaking bugs I ran into. And that seems to be the case for a lot of people. Early on with the game, first 10 hours, 20 hours, no bugs. Yes, the weird people clipping through stuff or having their back turned to you, whatever. That's not stopping you from enjoying the game. It's just weird, right? But having side quests being unfinishable, having story missions disappear from the ability to select them to go and do them, those are things that prohibit you from playing the game. I took a week off from playing the game because I couldn't figure out how to get past it. So it collapses under its own weight in that way. I also think that this game was just trying to be too much. Starfield, I truly believe, if they had made it so that it was like Mass Effect, where there was only a handful of planets that you could actually go down to, it made it a tighter experience. And instead of being this thing that's hundreds of hours long, was just 35 to 50 hours, I think it would be an all-time classic game. But there's just too much. They don't do enough with any of its ideas to make it to that next level of greatness. Like, everything is very good, but nothing is amazing, right? it's like I said with the entangled mission where you're swapping between dimensions. You could tell they really wanted that to be the thing that you talk about afterwards. They put so much extra effort into that mission, more so than any other one in the main story. They wanted that to be like the water cooler thing we were talking about it, but it's just not executed in an elegant enough way to take it from here to here. Right? Because there's those load times, because it always fades to black, because it's not seamless, because visually it just switches. It's like you're blinking your eye. If the walls came crumbling down and then you started to see all the alien bugs coming up from the ground, and that's how you transitioned from universe to universe, like that would have been such more of a more impactful moment. The fact that to gain the Starborn powers is literally the same puzzle on repeat, was it 24 times in the game, is just such a huge swing and a miss. So many fetch quests, just so many fetch quests. There are so many missions in this game that could have been accomplished with, I know that they weren't going to do cutscenes because that's not really what they do. There are some cutscenes in the game, but they're very, very minor. But man, if they had just done cutscenes, if they had just not made games in the way that they traditionally make games, I think this game just would have been so much stronger. It's one of my favorite games that I played this year, bar none. Probably one of my favorite games of the past 5 years, but it's not to that next level, right? It's spoiler alert. It's not going to be my game of the year. It just straight up isn't. And I don't think, if I think of the past, maybe last year, because last year was so weak for me personally with what I wanted to play. Starfield came out last year. What did I give? No, I gave it Immortality was like a defining game for me, but Starfield would have been the runner-up probably, right? So I don't know. It's tough to go back. I don't know how far I would have to go back to be like, oh man, if Starfield came out this year, it'd be game of the year. It just doesn't do enough. It's just not there. They need a tighter experience. And I know Bethesda is probably never going to really change the way they make games. It's just, that's the way they do things. But man, if they had just taken a page out of the Mass Effect playbook, I think we would be talking about Starfield in the same conversation as Mass Effect. Because Mass Effect it has been since it came out, and no one has come close to it. It is the bar for science fiction video games. It is such a grand story that executes not perfectly all times, but more often than not, it hits its mark. There are certainly a lot of issues with Mass Effect. Don't get me wrong. There are plenty of issues, but it still continues to be the high mark for sci-fi video games. And there is a version of Starfield that exists somewhere. It's so diluted down in there that, man, if they had just delivered that, I think it would have gotten tens across the board from all the media outlets, and people would be singing its praises. And it's just not that, you know, and who knows what happens with DLC. We have a confirmed DLC that's coming out at some point because you got it if you bought that like deluxe version of the game. We'll see what that is. I worry that it's probably just going to be more of the same and just going to be some combat and some fetch quests and all that stuff. But maybe they try to subvert expectations and do something different with it, because there are moments of this game where they do things not in the manner that you are accustomed to after dozens and dozens of hours of playing the game. So they have the ability to do it, but they just don't do it enough, and they don't do it all, you know, it's not all the time. They need to operate on that really, really high level. And it's just one of those things where, for me, Bethesda, and you gotta understand, I'm not this big Bethesda fan. You know, I haven't played all their games. I've played just a handful of them, and most of the ones that I have played, I didn't like. To me, Bethesda is just not on that. They're not on that upper echelon. They're just right below it, right? Like, amazing games with this amazing impact and legacy and influence, but none of those games individually are that all-time classic great kind of thing. I know Morrowind probably is for a lot of people, so I will concede to that. Most people that really enjoy Morrowind would say, like, no, this is an all-timer, but I didn't play it to completion, so I can't say for that personally. But when you compare Starfield to some of the other stuff that has come out from very high level developers, stuff from like, Last of Us, Uncharted, the high points of Halo, even if you want to use an Xbox example, some of the stuff that Nintendo's been able to pull off, with the modern Zeldas and Mario Odyssey. It's just like, you look at Starfield and you're like, it has all the potential, but it's just not there. So yeah, that's kind of my final thoughts on Starfield. I'm more than happy that I experienced it. I can honestly say I loved it. It's just not everything that we all thought that maybe it could be. I had no expectations going in, especially because, like I said, Bethesda stuff I'm not a huge fan of. I bought into the hype enough, and it was out on Game Pass, that I was like, yes, 100% I am in. Let's do this, and I am invested. But there were definitely times where I was playing that game along the way where I was just like, I think I need a couple days. Like, I just don't want to be playing this right now. Like, it's just not holding my attention. And then I would hit like a side quest. I was like, oh shit, like now I'm invested again. Or like the main story would pick up and be like, oh, I'm back in it. There's very much like a roller coaster of a game. But yeah, it is a good game, but it's a great game, but it's just not, a lot of people were building it up to be something that it just isn't. And that's okay. And for some people it is going to be a 10 out of 10 and a perfect game and one of their all-time favorite games. Like that's awesome. But, for me, I think it's just not quite there. But it is certainly one of the best games to come out this year. If you haven't played it, I definitely suggest giving it a try, because I think that there are some things there, but also if you haven't played it, why you've been listening to me ramble on about spoilers. So, Christian, do you have anything you want to say about Starfield now that we're wrapped up with it?
This game tries to get all intellectual and shit with its choice about sacrifice and leaving a life behind. Bump that. This game was about mowing down 1 million people with magnetic bullets and stealing all their clothes.
Yeah, you do a lot of killing. That's like one of those things is like, at no point in this game do people like understand like your abilities. Like, you have this high level armor signifying that you're like a captain in the UC military and nobody gives a shit. Like nobody cares whatsoever that you're one of the Freestar Rangers. Like none of the major quests have any impact on each other, which is like a big downfall of the game. Is just nobody cares that you are this like all powerful being that has done everything. The only person in the settled systems to be a member of the Vanguard and the Freestar Rangers and a corporate spy for Ryujin Industries. And just, it doesn't matter. Nobody cares. So that is, it's a downside. But all right, so that does it for Starfield. That was really kind of the only thing I played this week. I talked about in the community post earlier this week, I was thinking about streaming some Burnout 3, but it just didn't happen. I just didn't have the time. I haven't gotten a chance to mess around with more emulation stuff. It's on my to-do list for this week, because this week I have a little bit more free time on my hands to be able to mess around with some stuff. And especially with having Starfield done and out of the way, I could devote my time to working on, finishing the MK1 story, making my way further into Phantom Liberty and all that good stuff. But yeah, that's going to wrap up what I've been playing, and we'll be back in just a moment with the news. All right, we are into the news, and thankfully a little bit more upbeat than last week. With a little bit less layoff stuff to talk to, though. Plenty of layoff news has been going on, but I kind of wanted to focus on some other stuff. So we'll start off with kind of like, this is mostly a minor story, but Sony is bringing Bravia Core to the PS4 and to the PS5. So if you're not familiar with what Bravia Core is, you obviously don't own a top of the line, high end Sony television, you fucking poor. So Bravia Core is Sony's streaming service. A lot of people were like, where are all the Sony Pictures movies? How come they're not on streaming services? And some of them certainly are, but it's because they're all on Bravia Core, and Bravia Core is a streaming service that literally you can only access if you have a super high-end Sony television. So the pull of Sony Bravia Core is that their marketing behind it is that it is the absolute highest quality streaming service out there. And as somebody, I have access to Bravia Core thanks to my television. It is it never has any lagging issues. It requires a huge download commitment. Like I would say, if you are not on like gigabit internet, it is probably not going to work right, because the picture quality it really is. It's very, very nice. It's like all like super IMAX enhanced, Dolby Atmos, Dolby Vision, HDR, 4K, salad shooter madness. Like it's all the bells and whistles that you could possibly ask for. So basically what it is on the television, at least, is when you buy a valid Sony television, you get access to Bravia Core. It comes pre-installed in your Android TV front end, and there's even one of those little shortcut buttons on the remote for it. And what it is it's kind of two services in one. One is it has a standard movie library like you would find on like Netflix or Hulu. And those are just movies that you can hit play on and they start playing. Some of them are souped up, 4K, HDR, all that stuff. And some of them are not. It kind of depends on the movie. There are some older movies that just aren't. But everything, even if it isn't with all the features, they still look really good. Like they are at the very least Blu-ray quality, movies, like high def movies. But most of them, and even some like the older movies, like Karate Kid is on there and it's in like 4K HDR, the whole deal. But then the other draw is that they have, like, as soon as a Sony Pictures movie is like done with its theatrical run, it's there on Bravia Core. Now it's not free to watch. You do have to pay, but if you have a Bravia television, you get 10 tickets. You have 2 years to use your 10 tickets. I have used 1 ticket so far, and I've had access to it for 9 months. So it's just the way it is. And so you can use one of those tickets and get the movie for free and watch it. So they had like Across the Spider-Verse, the new Spider-Man animated movie is on there. So if you have tickets, you could just watch it. You don't have to pay to rent it. Like those movies are like the new release movies are like $20 to rent at like Fandango at Home and Vudu and Amazon and all that stuff. And you could just use it here. So you will have the ability to do this on the PlayStation consoles. It says they are not calling it Bravia Core because that doesn't really work on the PlayStation because you may not have a Bravia television. You may have no idea what the hell Bravia is. So they're just calling it Sony Pictures Core. You can buy or rent up to 2,000 new and classic Sony Pictures movies. I would actually say that 2,000, that's way more than what's on Bravia Core. I want to say, yeah, because it says, Sony says the PlayStation Plus members on the premium or deluxe tiers will get access to a curated catalog of up to 100 movies. I want to say that's what's on Bravia Core, because there are not that many movies on it. I would say, yeah, 100 or less sounds right. It says the no ads for the movies, they'll be updated periodically. And yeah, so it's just, I guess it's just a little bonus. It doesn't sound like they're doing this ticket system with this. Looking at screenshots of it, it is missing all of the ticket icons on the movies. So I'm assuming that it's just going to be, hey, you have to pay to rent these movies or you will get some of these movies to watch for free. So it sounds like they're kind of abandoning that aspect of it. I think that's probably for the best. It would probably be confusing to explain this especially because like the tickets have a time limit. Like I have to use all my tickets by February 2025. If I don't, then that's it. I have to start paying for movies. So it's kind of an odd setup, but it's a nice streaming service because of how powerful it is. The one thing I do worry about with this is at no point in this kind of press release does it talk about the quality of the films and the internet requirement. Like there's a hard internet requirement. It's something like 45 gigs a second or 45 megabytes a second or 75 megabytes a second or something. It's like double what Netflix demands for their 4K stuff or something like that. So I'm wondering if maybe you are just not getting that through this, and they will show you the movie as high quality as they possibly can. I'm sure it'll have, it'll be 4K with HDR and all that stuff. But Sony or the PlayStation 5 still doesn't have Dolby Vision. They put in Atmos in a recent update, but they don't have Dolby Vision. So maybe once they do, if they ever do, maybe they will be like, hey, now if you really want to see this stuff in all its glory, you're going to need this kind of internet requirement. I don't know, but it's a nice service for what it is, because you do get those new Sony movies like available to watch like as soon as possible. Like Gran Turismo just hit the other day. I haven't gotten a chance to watch it yet, but I am going to watch it at some point before the end of the year. But it's just a nice little bonus, I guess, for PlayStation fans. And if you ever end up buying a Bravia television, now you know all about Bravia Core.
Yet another streaming service that doesn't have any of my movies. When are these executives going to realize that there's a grassroots demand to see Jimmy Hollywood in 4K HDR? Joe Pesci only called me a motherfucker twice while we were making it. I take that as a badge of honor.
Dude, nobody wants to watch Jimmy Hollywood. There are plenty of movies of yours I would love to watch. I like many of your movies. But, yeah, you know what? To be honest, man, I give you credit, Christian. Yeah, a lot of your movies are not on streaming services. What the hell is up with that? Go watch, why am I forgetting my favorite movie of yours? Oh, my God, the Pirate Radio one. Pump Up the Volume. That's a great movie. Like, with no sarcasm whatsoever. That's a great movie. Go watch Pump Up the Volume. Christian Slater at his finest. All right, let's move on to probably, I guess, the bummer news of the week, though it's not that bad, I guess. Nintendo announced that they are officially shutting down 3DS and Wii U online servers in April of 2024. So, yeah, 2024 is going to be a big year for services going away, because that's when the 360 stuff is getting sunsetted. So this was a tweet, a post, whatever they're called on X now. It says, as of early April 2024, online play and other functionality that uses online communication will end service for Nintendo 3DS and Wii U software. Thank you very much for your continued support of our products. So the one exception is Pokemon Bank. I'm not sure what Pokemon Bank is. I imagine it's some type of Pokemon storage thing. They said that will continue to be just fine. But yeah, they're going to get rid of Nintendo Land and Street Passes and all that good stuff. And it's just kind of the end of an era. I enjoyed the 3DS. I wasn't the biggest 3DS diehard, but I really did enjoy that system. I liked it quite a bit. There were a lot of fun games on there, and so this is a little bit sad. I mean, certainly you can still go out and buy a 3DS and buy some games, but the online functionality at the very least is going to be gone. The Wii U, though, however, I do have some real sentimental attachment to the Wii U. I really liked the Wii U. I was probably like the biggest champion of anybody I know in my sphere of influence, as I have been told that I have, of the people around me. I really had some fond memories of that. I've talked about it on the show before, but in 2015, I broke my back for the second time, which meant that I had to have some pretty severe surgery. I was going to be out of work on disability for about 3 months. And, for the first little bit until I started getting up strength, my strength back up so I can go to physical therapy and all that, I really just needed to sit. They wanted me to go home and just kind of sit on the couch and not really move. And so when all of that happened, I was living in an apartment with a roommate. And so during the day, I was just by myself because he was off at work. And so when my parents brought me home from the hospital to my apartment, my mom said, do you want me to go to the store to get you anything? And at that time, Splatoon had just come out. So I wrote it down on a piece of paper. I said, yeah, if you don't mind going to GameStop and picking this up. And she was like, absolutely. So my mom went over to GameStop, grabbed a copy of Splatoon and brought it back. And man, I played so much Splatoon for the next 2 to 3 weeks. That was the only thing I did during the day. Absolutely loved it. I ended up, for whatever reason, I'm not sure why it was, I ended up on a bunch of Japanese servers where nobody spoke English and everybody was really, really good at the game. And those were the only matches I could get into. I'm not exactly sure why, but I just remember, all of the player names were just written in katakana or kanji or whatever. And I was just like, hey guys, ink is real great, right? I'm just getting dominated the entire time. But yeah, I had a blast. So I definitely have a really strong, like, nostalgic connection to the Wii U. I played a lot of great games on the Wii U. Man, Splinter Cell Blacklist on the Wii U was super good. Need for Speed Most Wanted was great. I even played Deus Ex on the Wii U. Zombie U wasn't all that bad. Mario Kart, just so great. I really loved the Wii U. It's odd that that's the one that I have such a connection to and an attachment to. But man, Wii U was, don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Wii U was a good system. It had some good games. Good times were had on the Wii U. But yeah, again, this, ties into the larger question of like game preservation and all that stuff. And I'm sure hopefully people will do kind of the due diligence of what happens when this all comes around and start ripping things, and potentially get some back end server stuff running. There are plenty of like MMOs that have been canceled for years and gone away that still have like private servers running that you can interact with. So maybe somebody will keep Splatoon 1 online going somehow, but it's a shame to say kind of goodbye, but that's kind of the way it goes in the video game industries. You can't keep everything running forever. I can only imagine what the player count is for original Splatoon and other online games of that time. But yeah, so, pour one out onto the grave of the Wii U and the 3DS. Two really solid systems that definitely, you can see that they both laid the groundwork pretty hard for Nintendo's kind of next era with the Switch and their really kind of return to prominence after all the success they had with the Wii. So yeah, goodbye Wii U and 3DS. You will be missed.
How am I going to send my dick pics through Nintendo Land now?
You probably shouldn't be doing that to begin with, man. But in other Nintendo news, this one was weird because it's like, why wouldn't you? But Nintendo has come out and said that they are going to continue supporting the Switch next year. It's like, okay, why would you not? I think this is just kind of like one of those things where it's like they're kind of putting the cart before the horse a little bit because they know that they're probably announcing the successor to the Switch next year, and they just want to get out ahead of it, I guess, because the rumors have been swirling. But they said at the very minimum they will continue to support the Switch through the fiscal year, which ends for them in March 2025. That last Nintendo Direct is pretty much what you expect for modern Nintendo when a system of theirs is at end of life. That's when they start putting out a lot of compilations, remakes, bizarro, smaller scale projects that probably wouldn't be greenlit as like a launch title for a new system, or even like a marquee game in year 2 or 3 of its lifetime. You're seeing like the Princess Peach game next year, the HD remake or remaster, I'm not sure how they're positioning of it, of Mario the Thousand Year Door, Paper Mario, Luigi's Mansion 2 HD. They're doing the Mario RPG deal that I think is next month. So you're getting all those like kind of cool end of life cycle Nintendo stuff. And I'm sure that's going to continue. They're going to keep making Switch games for at least the next few years because they really have no incentive to stop right now. The Switch is still doing well. Like, yes, sales are down, but it's still doing really well. And if the next system isn't backwards compatible, that's a huge miss on their end. So, people will still be able to enjoy these games. So it's kind of, like I said, cart before the horse. They're just kind of getting out in front of this in kind of a bizarre way. It's like, it's almost like they're confirming that a new system is coming out soon without actually confirming it. I imagine we don't hear anything about the new system until probably summer. It's possible springtime. Maybe they sneak a little thing in there. They've done that before with like the Zelda stuff, where at the end of the Nintendo Direct, they'll be like, oh yeah, and by the way, like this is happening and we're going to talk about it in the future. Like it'll just be like a couple of lines. I think they did that once with Zelda where they were just like, by the way, we are working on the next Zelda, and that was it. And then, eventually they showed it off down the line. So maybe they do that. Maybe March, April, they go, hey, Switch 2 is coming out soon. Hear about it this summer. And then during Game Fest E3 time, they're like, here's the Switch 2 and blah, 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 blah. And then in the fall, it's like, and here's the price and release date and all that. Like maybe they kind of like meter it out through the year, but the Switch isn't going anywhere, at least for the next couple of years. So don't fret about that. And then to round out the news, man, Cyberpunk is just like, it's all over the place, man. You can't get away from Cyberpunk right now, which I'm okay with because I like Cyberpunk. But Cyberpunk seems to be starting some type of media empire, seemingly out of nowhere. I think it's mostly because they have redeemed themselves for the most part with Cyberpunk 2077 and Phantom Liberty and the 2.0 version of the game and all that stuff. And some of the extended Cyberpunk stuff that has come out of it, like Edge Runners was a very well-received anime on Netflix. They have started to talk about the future of Cyberpunk. So last week we mentioned a little bit that like they are ending development and production on Cyberpunk 2077, and they're moving that staff over to the next Witcher entry. And then a whole other team in America is working on, they're essentially just calling it Project Orion because it's not going to be called Cyberpunk 2. It would be called Cyberpunk 2150, or, it'd probably have some year attached to it. But here's what the article said. This is from Tom Ivan over at VGC. There is a quote from Adam Badowski. He is CD Projekt's chief creative officer. It says this project is on a conceptual design level right now, and it's going to be designed by a team of veterans who are responsible for fine-tuning Cyberpunk 2077 and designing Phantom Liberty. This is about Project Orion. So essentially, it's the people that fixed Cyberpunk and made Phantom Liberty. So that works. It says they are going to be working out of the North America, Vancouver, and Boston locations. Their leadership is already there. Late in 2024, we're going to work with teams comprising several dozen people, while as a target, half the developers are going to work out of the northern US and the other half out of Poland. They also announced during all of this past week that Cyberpunk 2077 has now hit sales of 25 million, which means it is selling far faster than The Witcher 3 did. Phantom Liberty sold 3 million copies in its first week. And then the other story that came out is that a live-action Cyberpunk project is in development. It says it will be handled set in the world of Cyberpunk and handled by independent global media company Anonymous Content. They have not said if it's a movie, a television show, or anything like that. It says CD Projekt Red will be collaborating directly on the project with the head of television, Garrett Kemble, from Anonymous Content. That leads you to believe it would be a television show, but who knows? It says also involved in the project are Ryan Schwartz and Chief Creative Officer David Levine. So Levine is an interesting one. He used to be HBO's co-head of drama, and he was around for True Detective, True Blood, and Westworld. Now, True Detective, the first season obviously is like landmark television. The other seasons I haven't seen, so I can't speak to them, but I know they are kind of a varying quality. Westworld, I know, started off really strong and then kind of fell off. It's kind of the same with True Blood, but I mean, those are three very big and kind of iconic modern HBO shows. They are looking for a screenwriter for the project, and then they kind of follow up by saying like, hey, this isn't the first time we've done something like this. Edge Runners exists and all that stuff. So I am really curious to see what they do. I have to imagine that a live action Cyberpunk is going to go one of two ways. If it gets the budget it deserves, it will look amazing and potentially be this really, really cool thing. Or if it's on a lower budget, it could end up looking really cheap and just of poor quality. That's kind of like the way that Twisted Metal on Peacock looks to me. I know a lot of people ended up really liking Twisted Metal, but it looked so cheap. It just looked like they just didn't have the budget, and everything looked very, not even like indie movie. It just looked just like, I don't want to use this like in a negative term, but it's just like when you see like a show from like Canada, like where they're using, I don't know, that's wrong because Canada has some really great television shows. Corner Gas, it looked like a Hallmark budget, right? Like a Hallmark movie. There are some great, perfectly enjoyable Hallmark Christmas movies, but they all kind of have that same look and feel. Like they feel kind of like a soap opera-ish budget, like it's just not quite there. So it all depends on how they're going to do it. Like if they have the resources of like a Last of Us, cool, amazing, great, grand. I don't know what Levine's relationship with HBO is. I don't know if they could like find a deal with HBO and maybe say like, hey, Last of Us did really, really good. We think this thing could do really, really good. Give us, give me money. I'm old. Gimme. Maybe if they go that route, it ends up being this really cool and amazing thing, but we shall see. If it's a movie, I would say maybe it has a better chance of having like a higher end budget. But I think for Cyberpunk in particular, for me personally, I think either a limited series, like, hey, this is just 8 episodes or 10 episodes or whatever, and that's it. Or they do like a traditional, like, a Showtime HBO, like here's some eight episode season or whatever, and we do the first season and see how it goes, and maybe we get a second season. I think television is probably the route to go with it. And the other thing is my concern is the writing. They can't do this edgy bullshit because it's just not going to fly on television or in a movie. People are going to make fun of it to no end if they try and do this. They are going to have to keep some of the slang, absolutely. They can call each other tombs all they want, but they are going to definitely have to tune down a lot of the edgy, angsty, teenager emo bullshit that is in that game. So we'll see. But I am consider me excited. I enjoy Cyberpunk. I think that there is a lot of potential there. I think the next game is poised to just be incredible with all the lessons that they have learned. Like, I cannot wait. I want them to just, man, I really want them to just go for it. Just dump everything they have into it once they're done with the next Witcher and just come out with just an amazing experience. I think it would be such like an amazing full circle redemption story for them if they were able to do that. But we shall see. Christian, do you have any thoughts on this? I know anytime that there's an acting mention on the show, you always have some thoughts.
I think I would be a perfect choice to play a cyber psycho. Yeah. I have the body, I have the edgy attitude, I'm pretty much Teemu Keanu Reeves.
I think that's a really accurate statement. Teemu Keanu Reeves, absolutely, man. So that's going to wrap up the show for this week. So coming up on the channel over the next few days, a little bit back to normal. So tomorrow there will be a video going up of the new RoboCop game. The demo is out and I want to check it out. I have heard that it is very interesting. The original RoboCop is one of my all-time favorite movies, so I'm very curious to see how it is going to go. Tomorrow is Forza. So I will be doing a video for Forza that will be up on Wednesday. So RoboCop video on Tuesday morning, Forza video on Wednesday morning. And then starting today for you guys, tomorrow for me, is the next Steam Next Fest. And every time we do one of those, I try to do a roundup of games. So expect some footage later in the week of demos that I find interesting. If you want to see the last one, it's up on the channel. And yeah, that's going to do it. We'll get back to a little bit normalcy this week, and yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I really want to see what's in that Steam Next Fest. I haven't heard any rumblings of games yet, and I'm sure by the time tomorrow ends, we'll have a full rundown of here's the stuff that you absolutely need to check out. So I am very excited. I have really enjoyed these demo events that they have been doing. But yeah, that's going to wrap things up. Before we get out of here, Christian, do you have any last words for everybody this week?
Last week I mentioned my online appliance dating situation, yep. And I gotta tell you, my game is taking a step in the right direction. Good. I didn't meet a sexy toaster, but I found a lawnmower with a huge rack.
Awesome. Take it easy, everybody. We'll see you again real soon.